Hot flashes, night sweats, or kick your booty fatigue? Those symptoms of menopause do not have to run your life. This episode is all about solutions, natural ones that get you back on track, feeling 100% your sassy self again in no time. I'm Deborah Atkinson, and you're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top struggles and concerns, and I share what to eat, how to move, and how to change your thinking so that you can have the energy and the vitality that you want, need, and deserve in this second and better half. And just before we dive into talking about what you can do to solve all those nasty little challenges that might creep up in this moment we're in, this episode is brought to you by the Flipping 50 Fitness Specialist. So for those personal trainers and health coaches, and I know you're out there, or those of you who want a second career that you love, working with women just like you, the Flipping 50 Fitness Specialist is the first and the only fitness specialist certificate that helps trainers working with women, specifically in midlife, in all phases of menopause. So if you're looking to make a huge difference and leave a legacy, this is it. I'll leave the link to the Flipping 50 Fitness Specialist in the show notes. So let's start diving in. Many of you know I've been sharing, pretty much everything with you lately about what I've done to my hormones, for my hormones. And one of the things I've discovered, thanks to my doctor, is Macapause by Femmenessence. I felt better within a week. So I'm super excited to introduce my guest today to talk a little bit more about it and get into the nitty-gritty. Dr. Mona Fahoum, who's a naturopathic doctor specializing in women's health, hormones, and the microbiome. Dr. Fahoum's philosophy is to use a personalized approach, creating a unique plan for each patient, whether that is to trust the body to do its job or use conventional or natural treatments to achieve wellness. Dr. Fahoum is the doctor or director of clinical services at the Bastyr Center for Natural Health, the teaching clinic for Bastyr University. She's the past president of the Washington Association of Naturopathic Physicians, has her own private practice in Seattle, and is also on the medical team of Symphony Natural Health, the makers of Femmenessence, which I personally use and love, and you know I wouldn't share it with you otherwise. I've already shared it with many of our community members also using it. And the link to it will be in the show notes. So if you're walking, you're running, you're lifting, driving, I've got you covered. This is why I've got Dr. Fahoum here today. Outside of work, Dr. Fahoum is a mom, avid snowboarder, soccer player, and fitness enthusiast. Welcome to Flipping 50, Dr. Fahoum.
Thank you so much for having me, Deborah. And please, all my patients call me Dr. Mona, so we don't need to be so formal. And even Mona is fine too.
Well, since we're going to get down and in the dirt, that's a good thing.
Yeah. I'm not about the formality. I don't have a white coat on today.
One of the things I really love, two things. So when you add mom, snowboarder, soccer player, fitness enthusiast, I like you so much. And, I love the part in your bio about creating a unique plan for each patient, and then you go on to say that it is sometimes to trust the body to do its own job. So much like the exercise prescriptions designed at Flipping 50, we're so on the same page. Can you talk a little bit about what that means for you when you're working with a patient?
Absolutely. I think one of the best examples of letting the body do what it needs to do on its own is like when we have a temperature and we just let it run its course when we're sick. We get a temperature because our bodies are fighting something, whether it's a virus, a bacteria, something is not supposed to be there. So we have these defense mechanisms that raise the temperature and literally don't allow that virus or bacteria to survive. And even though we have to obviously watch temperatures and don't let them go over a certain level, especially for kids, we just need to support the body in doing what it needs to do. Most of the time it can take care of it on its own. And that applies to hormones and so many other things. So it extends to how I just practice integrative medicine for all of my patients. I'm all about building the foundation of diet and lifestyle. And then I want to use all my tools, botanical medicine, pharmaceuticals, all of those other pieces are tools and modalities to add on to what the body can already do. And I liken it sometimes to like a Band-Aid. We need a Band-Aid sometimes just deal with symptoms, right? So whether that's an herb or a med or whatever, we still need to be working on that foundation, which is much like how I think about femmenessence and bioidentical hormones. The femmenessence is the piece that nourishes the glands in the body that help build and produce hormones, and then usually it can work by itself. But if it's not enough, we can always add bioidentical hormones, hopefully in a little bit lower dose, to build on that foundation and support the women who need a little bit more in that moment.
And I know so many of my audience members are thinking, oh, I like the way she thinks. Yes, just give it the help where it needs it, but get my body to do what it should naturally do anyway. So my audience has heard how literally I invite them to my doctor's appointments. How cool is that? This is definitely 2020, but my audience, they've heard how my doctor in OBGYN, Dr. Sean Tassone, has put me on both bioidentical hormones and suggested right out of the gate Femmenessence. Can you go into some more details for listeners to really understand how each of those work and how they're complementary to each other?
Absolutely. Sure. Bioidentical hormones are medications that are created in a lab, but they're chemically identical to the hormones that are created in our body already. So examples of those would be like estradiol and progesterone and testosterone. We're talking about menopause and that kind of thing, but also simple things like thyroid hormone. That is basically, depending on the type of medication you get, that can be bioidentical as well. And so using those can be wonderful when the body is deficient. We can actually just add them in so the body can pick them up right away and use them just like thyroid is used to replace the lack of production in someone who has hypothyroidism. That's what happens in menopause. And we can use those bioidenticals to like bring those levels back up to a more functional level to manage symptoms and help people feel good again. The other option, instead of introducing hormones created in the lab, is using a botanical like Femmenessence and the Macapause that's nourishing the whole system of glands in the body. So in this case, with Femmenessence, we're talking about the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA axis, which is in charge of balancing and regulating your body's production of those hormones. So when we're talking about balance, we're talking about Femmenessence and the Maca in it helping regulate the signaling out of that gland so we can increase or decrease the production of hormones as needed. I usually tell patients it's like improving the communication between the brain and the body.
Love that. And that HPA axis, or as laymen might say, and I know not as necessarily recognized, but we're referring to it as adrenal fatigue on the streets. That was really the biggest sign for me, where it was the last straw. I'll say that because I think women, we tolerate a lot and we can say, no, I'm fine, I've got this. And, when that changed for me, when I wasn't popping up in the morning the way I've done my entire life, I was like, okay, that's it. Something's got to go here. Something's got to change. Mm-hmm. And that within 7 days was improved with Femmenessence. It was amazing.
Yeah. So I do that all the time.
Yeah, I bet. Right. What a great job you have, right? Yeah. Everybody's happier.
Work.
Listeners are going to love, first of all, the possibility that they may not all need bioidentical hormones if Femmenessence gets them into the balance. So is that what you're saying? It's what I want to be hearing.
It is what I'm saying. I unless a gal has a severe case or has entered menopause early, like had she's post hysterectomy, and so we have premature ovarian failure or premature menopause, then I usually start patients out on Femmenessence first. and get as much balance as possible. And then I see what we need to add on if there's anything else happening. So if I need to include a specific hormone, I may be able to get away with a much lower dose or a shorter duration of that hormone and keep it much more targeted for that individual. And I won't lie and say that we never need to use BHRT or bioidentical hormones on top of the Femmenessence. I do that because some people just have a rough time. But a lot of the time we can get away from that or just use it during like the height of perimenopausal hot flashes and night sweats. And then we can back off of it and just use the natural botanical.
Love that. And I'm going to divert. So, in fairness to Dr. Mona, for listeners, she doesn't have this question, and we prepare in advance. So, she has most of them. This question I know is going to come up, so I hope it's okay and appropriate. I've got a lot of listeners who may have had breast cancer or another cancer. What about Femmenessence for them?
Sure. Well, we do have a white paper on our website about breast cancer and Femmenessence. And generally speaking, of course, we're going to say you need to talk to your doctor about the use of anything post breast cancer. Certainly not if you're on a medication like methotrexate or tamoxifen, something that is intentionally trying to, especially tamoxifen, intentionally trying to suppress estrogen in the system. Mm-hmm. And so there's going to be some absolute contraindications. But for a lot of gals, this is the best option for them because hormones are off the table. Mm-hmm. And since Femmenessence is not a phytoestrogen and it is not a hormone, we're simply trying to increase and modulate some production from other places, right? The ovaries aren't working in menopause anymore, but we can still make estrogen and some progesterone from the adrenal glands and from fat stores. It is typically safer to use in a patient like that or a woman like that versus HRT. So I have to give some caveats, but it is possibly a good solution.
Great answer. Thank you so much. All right. So hormone balance. That just makes me laugh, actually. So hormone imbalance, sometimes I define when I'm doing a presentation because we have to talk about hormone balance and define hormone imbalance both so that we get that relativity. But it's become such a catchphrase for women's health in the last 5 years. And maybe that's 5 years that I've really been paying attention. And yet it's used in such general terms and kind of a blanket statement. Can you break down specifically for the women listening how hormones impact the issue that we're experiencing during menopause, or many are, and why imbalance is referred to as the root cause? Okay, big question here. And if we can, let's start with what so many women experience: hot flashes and night sweats.
Sure. And you're right. It is such a catchphrase. And I always have a joke about the antioxidant of the day, right? Because there's always some popular antioxidant that someone just discovered in some remote forest, and then next week it'll be something else. And so this is definitely a popular thing right now. But I think in the end, we have to use it in general terms, and it can mean so many different things because we're still trying to understand medically and scientifically all the different ways that estrogen and progesterone affect all the different body systems. It's like every day there's a new study coming out how estrogen affects the cardiovascular system, how it affects neurotransmitters in the brain and depression, all of those different things. So I think that's why it ends up being just kind of a bucket that we dump everything into. Hot flashes and night sweats, as a primary example of what's happening in menopause, though, is when a gal hits perimenopause or menopause, I think that imbalance or hormone balance really is referring to the lack of our natural rhythm, the natural rhythm that we've been following for however many years, up to 52, whatever it is that we go into perimenopause and menopause. It's gotten completely disrupted by that drop in estrogen, hence imbalance. And so because estrogen actually helps regulate our sympathetic or fight or flight part of the nervous system, that is how we end up with temperature dysregulation, because that sympathetic nervous system can actually affect kind of our core temperature regulation center. And so any little upset, a stress, a sudden outside temperature change, or even breathing can trigger
That's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like breathing rate. So if you pick up your breathing rate or you're not taking deep, nice, calm breaths, that can actually trigger that kind of fever response. It tips the scale on our temperature, our core temperature regulator. And so you end up with blood vessels dilating and sweating, and then you're off to the races. So anything we can do to mitigate that threshold of temperature variance, we can see improvements. So if we're talking about breathing, I think about meditation, breath work, got to have the sleep support in there, all those things that relax that side of the nervous system, that fight or flight, running from the saber-toothed tiger part of the nervous system is going to help. And then, of course, anything we can do to increase or stabilize estrogen in the system is going to help with the hot flashes and the night sweats.
Curious, in all of the people that you've seen, so there are research studies, and in all of the women that I've worked with over 36 years, and much more specifically in midlife in the last 8, there is some correlation. But what about you, as far as all the literature about exercise and the ability to help reduce either the intensity or the frequency of hot flashes and night sweats seems to be related to adequate intensity. So it's not just, are you exercising regularly, but are you doing, for instance, HIIT training or reaching fatigue, getting intense? Can you just, and I know I'm kind of asking you to talk off the record, on the record, but can you see in those people who are maybe a little bit more fit, fewer and reduced intensity of hot flashes and night sweats?
I think I can, even off the cuff. I often am trying to catch my late 30, 40 something patients and talk to them about the importance of getting the exercise, getting the diet, getting the nutrition, getting all those pieces lined up before they even get close to perimenopause, because I see those gals entering the process who are more fit, especially with, like you said, the HIIT workouts and that to fatigue kind of scenario. They generally make that transition much smoother. Not everyone, there's some genetic stuff in there that we probably can't account for, but
Right.
generally speaking, if we can get people set up ahead of time, it's so much smoother.
Great. Thanks for that feedback. Okay. So there's that hot flashes, night sweats, but there's also mood swings. So what have you to say about that?
When it comes to mood swings, I always find it interesting to note that when we see mood swings when we're having our regular menstrual cycle, it's usually right before our period, when estrogen and progesterone, all that stuff surges. So you could kind of call that an imbalance. Or when we're in pregnancy or postpartum, and then again at menopause. So these are all times, back to that earlier question of hormone balance being this kind of bucket catchphrase. We see the most mood swings happen when we have these upheavals and either estrogen is too high or progesterone is too low. So we kind of expect to see that with menopause too, because we see it in other stages of our life where we have that imbalance. So, or those swings. I kind of don't like the word imbalance, right? This is all a natural process. It's supposed to be happening. It's just these swings, or a better word, maybe fluctuations in those hormones, are a little bit problematic. And we need to figure out how to kind of bring those peaks and valleys closer together so that there's less fluctuation. And so it's not a lack of antidepressants or a Prozac deficiency. It's the balance that we need to seek, and the balance from that excess or deficiency from day to day that we're really trying to manage with, whether it's botanicals or BHRT. That's what we're trying to do, is create a much more stable condition for the body, and the brain and moods respond to that.
Great answer. All right. And the next one is really, I mean, this is, it's so hard. It's complex. Poor sleep, poor sleep and lack of energy. And poor sleep is such a dual-edged sword.
It is. And because you're right. It's a lot of stuff. So poor sleep in menopause is partly from the night sweats, right? That's the primary reason people are waking up, is they're sweating and wetting their pajamas and having to change sheets in the middle of the night. And then you get the subsequent fatigue because you had lack of sleep. So you end up in this nasty little hamster wheel that we've got to break. And then even once we break that cycle and get rid of the night sweats and get people sleeping well, there's still an energy and a sleep thing that can happen for some of those gals once the temperature is managed. So I believe that most of that is the result of the relationship between estrogen and progesterone, or the lack thereof in menopause,
Mm-hmm.
how it interacts with cortisol and blood sugar and thyroid hormone. So I always think about hormones as like a tangled up ball of yarn. And if
Mm-hmm.
you pull one string, you're going to tighten or loosen others in the knot. And so just pulling on one string doesn't necessarily fix it. If we can work from the top down, and back to that analogy of getting the brain, which is the hypothalamus and the pituitary, communicating more effectively with the rest of the body, not just estrogen, but the adrenal glands and the cortisol and the insulin, then we can actually get somewhere with all of those symptoms and get the energy back and sleep better and all those other pieces.
Amen. Good night. That's right.
We'll get there. No.
Right. Yes. All right. And so many of our listeners are also concerned about or first getting their uh, bones, bone density scanned, and they're being told they've got either osteopenia or osteoporosis due to low bone density. What do we do about that?
We get exercising, which I'm sure you're talking to
Mhm.
all of
Mhm.
your listeners about, because
I set you up for that, by the way.
yeah,
But
no problem. I'll fall right for it. No, because it's so true, and that's usually where I start with all of my patients as well. It's that weight bearing exercise. We know that's going to help keep the bones busy, remodeling and rebuilding, and all of that. And then I always talk to patients about the core exercises and doing balance exercises, because even if you get some bone loss by the time you're 85 or 90, if you don't
Mhm.
fall because you've got great strength, or you have enough muscle memory that you know how to fall,
Mhm.
that's like when I snowboard. It's like I used to teach snowboarding. When you teach people how to fall so you don't break a wrist. If
Mhm.
you don't fall and don't break a bone, you can have a little bit of bone loss. But I tangented a little bit, but estrogen and progesterone directly impact our bone production and breakdown. So anything we can do to create a little more estrogen and progesterone, even minimally in the system, we're going to help create more repair and remodeling, so that that bone loss is not exceeding our remodeling rates. And so that's where, again, back to the hormone balance piece, we got to get it in there.
Fantastic. And optimistic. And I think that's what all of our listeners are looking for, because I'm not sure they always hear that. Maybe with their physicians it's a little doom and gloom, and then they get scared and they are actually becoming less active because they're a little fearful. So thanks for painting that picture. Finally, my audience, I know they've heard they even use a product of some type to support their hormone balance. And my personal experience is probably all the proof I need of, how different Femmenessence is. But how would you explain the differences between, say, Femmenessence and other products to my audience when it comes to hormone balance?
That's a great question, because for me as a doctor, and probably similarly to Dr. Tassone, when you're actually looking at published clinical research on natural products, especially ones that balance hormones, it's pretty slim to none out there. And then when you do find some, it's often related to adrenals and energy, and not the rest of the hormones. And while we obviously want plenty of energy during post and peri and post menopause, in the reality, there are so many other symptoms we need to look at besides those adrenals. And because as we talked about, they all play off each other. And what's really great about the Femmenessence is it's actually the only natural product that we've actually studied and demonstrated statistically significant effects on hormones in the published clinical trials. And so as a doctor, what is important for me is that I see the studies, but I also see the same results in my patients and the impacts on their overall health. And in the studies anyway, there's an 84% success rate with the Femmenessence in peri and postmenopausal women. But clinically, I'm seeing those improvements, the bone density, the cholesterol improvements, which we didn't even touch on, but like improving lipid levels in postmenopausal women, lowering risk for cardiovascular disease, because we know that's the number one killer in women postmenopause. Anything we can do to manage cholesterol, manage cardiovascular health, and is going to do all the things I'd expect to see in a herb or a supplement impacting hormones, and then I see it clinically. That's what I want to see as a doc. And more importantly for my patients, it's the relief that they feel from the symptoms that are affecting them day to day.
Fantastic. Great answer. And we're so all about clinical research and primary research. Flipping 50 is based on only research based on women in perimenopause or postmenopause. And there's very little out there, but at least it's 100% of what we use. So I hope everybody listening is in alignment. That's awesome. Okay, so my listeners have asked me this question. I have come up a little empty-handed and explained that I still do. However, I'm going to defer to you. So I've been adding maca to my smoothies for 26 years. And I started not even knowing this relationship with hormones and support. You know, I did it for endurance and stamina as an athlete long ago. And so I'm asking you, listeners want to know, many of them have followed me in using maca, adding it to smoothies. Can they continue to do that if they were doing Femmenessence, and distinguish between the two or compare and contrast?
Sure. That is a great question. And that is something that there is a big difference between the maca powder you grab at the store and the Femmenessence product line, whatever stage product you might be using. So a quick answer, the short answer is maca powder. Maca is a root. It's in the same family as broccoli and kale. It's a brassica from Peru. And when you get maca powder, you're getting, generally speaking, that root all ground up and dehydrated and put into a powder. You don't know which color or type or where it's from or any of that kind of stuff. So that's one major difference. When we're talking about Femmenessence, we are talking about a specific formulation of different colors of maca. So there's 13 different colors or types of maca, and they do different things. So the powder is typically the maca that helps with the adrenals and helps with energy production and stamina, which is great if that's what you're looking for. But it can also backfire. I have patients who come in I have to kind of convince them to try Femmenessence because they've had maca powders before and it made all their PMS or all their hormone stuff worse. And that's probably because it's the wrong color. It's the wrong type of hormone support for what we need to do in their system. So the quality and the concentration or potency of it is one big difference. And then the other difference is the right colors or types of the maca. So like for postmenopause, we don't want the same colors or the same action as we do for a younger gal who has PMS. She has plenty of estrogen and progesterone. In fact, she has too much estrogen. And we need to bring that down a notch. That's why she has terrible PMS. In menopause, we have a lack of estrogen and progesterone. So we got to use the right colors to actually tell the brain, to tell the body to make more estrogen and progesterone. So very different actions in the body, to the point of whether you can use them together or not. I'm sure some people totally can, and it doesn't cause any issues. I do see in some women, though, that does cause an issue because they kind of are competing with each other in quotes. So you've got the Femmenessence coming in, trying to tell the body, make a little bit more, make a little bit less of your estrogen and progesterone and cortisol. And then if you throw the powder in there too, you could be kind of sending a different signal. And so we can get some competition. So if people are having issues, I tell them to pull the powder and see if the Femmenessence is going to work better for them. And then other gals like yourself, it may not have as much of an impact.
Fantastic answer. Okay. And just to clarify for listeners, so I'm using the Macapause because that's where I'm at. But you also have another product. And if I were to simply look at the labels, and I might look and just say, okay, well, one is 500 milligrams and one is 1,000. So it's just that the Macapause is twice as much. Based on what you just said, that's not true. They're distinctly different.
They are distinctly different. We have put together a different blend of the different colors. Now you'll see some common ingredients between them, but there is a different blend of different colors or phenotypes of the maca in the different products for depending on the stage of life. Including there's actually a men's product as well, which is very different than the female line. Because with men, obviously it's more the adrenal, right? We're trying to push that and push testosterone, which you're definitely not trying to do in postmenopausal women.
Fantastic answer. Thanks so much. So listeners, again, if you're preoccupied, you're running, you're walking, which I hope you are, or you're lifting, driving, got you covered. So I'll put the link to Femmenessence It's flipping50.com/resources, where you'll find all the things that I know, love, and trust. And if I haven't used them myself, they don't appear there. So, one last question. So, in terms of bioidentical hormones and or femmenessence, I think a woman often looks at, first, should I do it? But even while she's thinking that, she's asking, how long do I do this? Like, will I do this the rest of my life? Will I do this for a little while? What might be your answer to that?
That is a great question, and what a great way to kind of wrap up too. There are so many different answers, and that's where I go back to, like, every gal is different and her situation is different and her family risk factors are different. Like if she has a family history of stroke and heart disease in her family, I'm probably going to encourage her to use the Femmenessence forever, because we need to mitigate that risk and we need to manage blood pressure more closely and all those things. And so the answer might be, for her, we're going to either use the Femmenessence or a little bit of extra BHRT with the Femmenessence for as long as we possibly can. And for someone else, it may just be they just need some help to get through menopause, and they just need to get rid of those hot flashes and get sleeping again. And otherwise, they've got no risk factors. They are exercising and eating right, and their cholesterol is perfect and all that. Then they may just use it symptomatically for their actual menopause symptoms, and they may decide to quit. So you can have, and so those are like the two ends of the spectrum. And then I have everyone in between.
Fantastic answer. Thank you so much. Okay, listeners, there you have it. The answers to potentially your hot flashes, night sweats, and ways to improve naturally, give your body the kick that it needs before or while you're doing bioidenticals, if you should decide to do it. I will link to everything that you need in the show notes, and you'll find that at flipping50.com/Macapause. That's MACA pause. So you can find what I'm using and have found to be a huge help. And if you're looking for a little extra help with bone density and or kicking that lean muscle mass into action, right now the doors to Stronger One are open. And if you get in now, you can still get a bit of that early bird discount before we begin July 1st. What are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 today.